Welcome to another edition of Throwing Out Some Heavy Light. My name is Jamal Bindon. I'm the chair of the board of Movement Omaha for Race Equity. And today we have on the show is Adam Fletcher Sasse, who has appeared on some of our previous programs discussing his books and articles on North Omaha and African American history and culture. We also talked about one of his reports he did on police brutality, which is an excellent piece, about 50 pages of giving history back in Omaha of all the crazy things that have happened to people of color, particularly related to the Omaha Police Department, law enforcement. We also plan Adam as one of our keynote speakers on October the 4th, discussing this book and how can we encourage more people to write about their history, and particularly African Americans in the community, and so on. I initially became familiar with Adam when he wrote an excellent obituary for Matthew Staley, who was a longtime community advocate, as well as Matthew was born in Hastings, Nebraska, along with me around the same time, but he was a few months older than I am. Matthew Staley taught Black Studies for UNO, and also when the chair of that department had a chance to acknowledge his contributions after his passing at their 50th anniversary, they ignored that. And again, they had some kind of crouton dinner, but they didn't seize the opportunity. And that was a concern to me and many others. As I said, Matthew was very much involved as an advocate, but also Matthew did not get along with a lot of people because he was a strong advocate that challenged systems and institutions. And again, I came a lot learn about Adam through his obituary and his respect for Matthew, as well as Matthew from time to time and him had locked horns, and Matthew disagreed with him on a number of issues. But Adam was the guy who wrote that, I thought, wonderful, excellent obituaries that we must acknowledge people who have done things for us or our communities, even though we may sometimes disagree with some of their polemics or their ideas and so on. Now, we will discuss the details of this book, hashtag Omaha Black History, and how we can encourage more African Americans and other people to do research to write about their respective histories. This also includes genealogy and so on. So I'm going to start off by saying welcome to Throwing Some Heavy Light, and also share a bit more about yourself, because I have a series of questions I'll get through before we open it up to the audience. So go forward.
Thank you, Jamal. I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me here, and I'm very grateful for you and all that you do. I'm appreciative of more, and for everybody who's joining in. So it was about 2008 when I found Wikipedia back in those old days, and Wikipedia was just this wild west of nothing. People were just starting to write it. And I found all these articles about Chicago and Chicago's history. And I was like, well, if they can do that about Chicago, I can do it about Omaha. I didn't have any sense of the scope or scale or anything. And so on Wikipedia in 2007, between 2007 and 2012, I started about 300 articles related to Omaha, not just the history, but everything. I found people, places, and events, but I went quite crazy. I wrote about the cuisine of Omaha. I wrote about travel in Omaha. I wrote about everything. And so I learned the city really, really intimately. I graduated from North. I grew up in the Miller Park neighborhood, and it really mattered to me, that place and that sense of kind of belonging that I grew up with, or lack of belonging, depending on how we define it. When I started on Wikipedia, one of the things that I found out right away is that all those volunteer hours that I did, other people were making money off it. And I didn't like that. That didn't feel good to me. At the same time, Facebook started to come around, and I started to push out content and create like a history conversation about Omaha's history on Facebook. And nobody was having that. Nobody was doing it. Nobody knew anything. We started this big old club that eventually got to 110,000 members before we shut it down. And that club was focused on Omaha's history. It was the first history group on Facebook about Omaha's history. Then we started another one called the Omaha History Club, and today that has 35,000 people who are doing the thing. And I'm not involved in leading it anymore, but I did found it back a long time ago. The other thing that I started with is NorthOmahaHistory.com. I took all those articles that I'd made for Wikipedia that were about North Omaha, and I brought them to my own site so I could write them the way that I wanted to. Writing encyclopedic articles is stupid and hard. They don't read well. They don't feel good. So I just took that content and I started to rewrite it, but then I started to chase the rabbit holes, the shiny objects in the sides, and basically there were stories, real human being stories, and interesting things that I remembered from my own youth, looking at 24th and Fort and wondering what those
Adam, I got about 10 questions to get you, so you're gonna have to have a little
you're
bit.
good. You're good. So long story short, Jamal, thank you. The long story short, I started doing it. I'm still doing it. I love doing it. I've written 8 books now. I've got 850 articles on NorthOmahaHistory.com, and we got the North Omaha History on social medias, and it's super fun. And it's an important thing that I feel really passionate about today.
Good.
It's all a passion project for me.
Now, this sounds a little strange, but I'm going to say this up front. I'm one of the very few book readers, advocates in North Omaha who purposely encourage people to read books and so on in our circle of influence. Again, there's probably others out there, but we don't connect. And I see books as a means to help deal with social justice and some of the things that we've done over the years. What propels you as a white guy to write about Black history in Omaha? And that's a question people ask when they look at your book. Again, if you could give me kind of a succinct answer, how did you get there? And then why is this book important? And what do you do?
A succinct answer.
Hey, the word is
Long
succinct.
story,
That's the word of
the
the
long
day.
story short, next door to me when I was growing up at 27th and Ellison was Mr. and Mrs. Hickerson. They said, call me Mama San and Papa San. And the Hickersons, they lived in the cleanest house in the neighborhood. It was nice lawn and everything. Miss Hickerson started hiring me to mow her lawn and to shovel her walk. And Miss Hickerson told me these stories when I was a teenager, when I was a nerdy, dorky white kid going to Macmillan, trying my best, then going to North, trying my best. And these stories that she told me were about growing up in the bottoms. She called them the bottoms, and her family ate dandelion stew, and it was all this vibrant stuff. And then I went to Pearl Church over at 24th and Fort, and there were old white people there who were like, "Oh yeah, there used to be a streetcar, and I took the streetcar right here all the way downtown." And there was a movie theater at 24th and Fort, and that's where I took my kids to watch movies. And none of this made any sense to me. In the 80s and 90s, when I was growing up in North Omaha, it was run down. Gangs were infiltrating, and it was portrayed to be so terrible and evil and bad. And that was my neighborhood. Those were my friends. That was my family. Those were my people. And I just grew passionate about it, Al Jamal. And the passion has never been quelched. I have done so much, but I know that there is so much more to go because this is just the tip of the side of the corner of the iceberg. White history, Black history, our history. And it's that whole thing about North Omaha isn't just Black people. Some people use it synonymously. North Omaha equals Black people in their imaginations. But what we know as a fact is that North Omaha has a whole lot of people, Black and white, but also brown, also
I'm gonna
queer,
switch up
all
on you
those
because
things.
I'm trying to get to these again. I'm OCD when it comes to my questions. If you notice,
You got to go.
someone who grew up in Omaha, I was a product of the racist educational system. I didn't really learn a lot about Black history and Native Americans and other racial groups until I really went to the university in Lincoln, where I had Native American teachers talking about their culture, which blew my mind because again, this was all new. How did you find about those racial incidents involving Black leaders such as physicians, lawyers, elected officials in Omaha, according to your book? And another thing is, you mentioned facts before 1850 to the year 1999.
That's
Again,
right.
as someone who's taught Black studies in Omaha and culture, someone that I didn't know. So my question is, why are institutions such as the public schools and universities not teaching local Omaha history and curriculum, especially about people of color? So there's two questions. How did you find the information, and why are these systems not teaching us some of the very things we should know as Omahans or people in Nebraska?
The information is buried. It's suppressed, repressed, denied, and exploited in order to benefit certain people with certain agendas doing certain things. And Ajamal, I know that you know this, but for the sake of everybody who's listening, this systemic oppression is real. It's not just a hypothetical. This actually reinforces the power of police. It reinforces the power of teachers. It reinforces the power of preachers. It reinforces the power of everybody who wants to use this history against the people who live in its repercussions every day. White history is taught almost exclusively in Omaha, especially white male history, especially rich white male history. And it's made out to be this lionized, wonderful thing that has no wrongdoings. All these streets that are named after old white guys, all the schools, all those things, they're named after people in order to push an agenda. And that agenda, as we've talked about, that agenda is white supremacy. That agenda is Omaha being dominated, maintained, and otherwise kept under the thumb of rich white guys. And so it's just perpetuating the systems that already exist. That is why it is the way that it is. In order to find the things that I found, that white supremacy has necessitated me becoming a digger. And that's the thing. I'm not a trained historian. I am not somebody who's had 1,000 hours of classroom time and doing all the things, and respects and props to people who do have those bona fides. But I have taught myself how to dig into the databases, how to find the scholarship, how to find the original sources, how to find the secondary and tertiary sources that back it up, how to look at the books critically in a critical light. My bachelor's degree was in critical pedagogy, and this whole notion that we have an oppressed class of people throughout our society who are being taught by teachers who maintain white supremacy and the dominance of classism. And so that's all that this history has been doing for all this time, and the reason why I have to do things the way that I do.
Good. Okay. The book brought me a great sense of joy. Matter of fact, some of the people who are on the set heard me talk about the importance of this book, and in a sense, the privilege of being someone who grew up in Omaha to learn things about actual peers and so on. Even your talk about the leadership of churches, what they did, and the actual roles of the Republicans and the Democrats, how they played different roles, unlike what they play today, a lot more engaged and so on. And back in the day, the Republican Party was stronger for Black folks than the Democratic Party. They're not that strong today, obviously, in the early days. But you cite newspapers as a key to their foundations. How many newspapers play a role in advocacy for African Americans? Also, you listed some of those newspapers. So give us a little bit about those responses to those things, those questions.
So a couple different things at work right there. And what you're talking about, Ajmal, are these systems of power. And whether they were political parties, whether they were newspaper in the popular media, whether they were oral history and the way that things used to travel, all of this worked in conjunction at some point in order to establish the Black population in Omaha as being powerful and full of possibility. And the fact of the matter is, in the 1870s, Omaha's first Black newspaper emerged. And you got to remember that back in those days, 150 years ago, newspapers were the mainstream media. They were the only media. There was no other media except for maybe billboards that were painted on the sides of buildings. You could see some of those ghost signs today in North Omaha.
And the old market also.
That's right. That's right. But the fact of the matter is that those Black newspapers were the engine, not just for Black people to learn about Black news, but for white people to learn about white news. And the difference between a lot of these papers were the ones who pervaded the white community instead of just focusing on reaching only the Black community. Gotcha. And so some of those newspapers before the Omaha Star, there were at least a half dozen.
Cool. 6 of them.
So, I mean, the fact of the matter is, the Progress was this giant newspaper that circulated 5,000 copies in a time when Omaha had a population of 50,000. So 10% of the city's population was getting a Black newspaper.
Wow.
And then we have other ones. We have the Monitor that was started by Reverend John Albert Williams. John Albert Williams, by what I can figure, he was kind of a nerd. He was kind of like me. I think him and I could have sat and had D for a little while and really learned something. And I could learn about it. That's a fact. But old boy, Reverend John Albert Williams started an Episcopal church. It was down at 22nd and Paul Street, down by Nicholas. So it was down by the old Logan Fontenelle projects. They actually demolished the church building in order to build the Logan Fontenelle projects. And this St. Philip's Episcopal Church was a hotbed of Black activism because of Reverend Williams.
Which came out of newspapers. What about
that's right. So you said not only did he start the Monitor, but he also started the NAACP and a couple other organizations. So these newspapers were the foundation that spread out power. Now let's go to that thing about the Republicans really quick. We've got to remember that Abraham Lincoln, who a lot of people maintained for 150 years was the great emancipator, was a Republican.
Okay.
Because back in those days, Republicans were for progress. Republicans were for justice. Republicans were for, now, were there still white supremacists who were Republicans? Absolutely. Just like today, when there's still Democrats who are white supremacists. Right. But for a long time, that was the party of liberation. That was the party of freedom. And so African-American people hooked onto the party, wove into the party very tightly. Now, one of the things I talk about in hashtag Omaha Black History, the book, is that party politic changed. In the 1920s, there was a giant flip-flop that happened nationwide where Democrats joined the Republican Party members joined the Democrats, and they switched sides. So the Democrats became liberal and progressive, and the Republicans stayed conservative.
And we oftentimes don't know about their parties because some of the people that work in the parties don't have a certain cognitive process of propagating or promulgating, let's say, conversations about what happened back in the past, even their current political stuff. Well, switch it up on you. There's another book I read, and it relates to some of the incidents that you talk about in your book. Is called A Dirty Wicked City, and I got a copy of it. I just finished reading that because your book propelled me to read another book. And basically, the book, again, talks about Omaha, and I didn't know Omaha was that dirty and filthy, and not only physically, but some of the corruption that we see today and incompetence in City Hall and county government. They were doing stuff worse as not they learned from each other. But my question is, David Breslow illustrates racism and corruption in the city, not as much as you do in your book, but he has that final chapter on George Smith being lynched, which is probably his longest chapter, probably one of the best chapters I've read in the book about that individual, which only learned about from Franklin Thompson. But my point is, since his founding and so on, why didn't you elaborate more on your book on some of those backstories as he did in his book? Because he talks primarily about the white establishment as people in the city, and he concentrates a lot earlier than you. But why didn't you elaborate a little bit more on your book and make it a little bit longer?
Honestly, it was all about page count. The fact of the matter is my book hits right at 101,000 words. David's book, you can see, is a lot slimmer. So he had more room to expound on those things. I wanted to put in granular factual items to just make sure that they got printed in case the train hit me tomorrow and I wasn't able to say another word. I wanted to make sure that I got at least that elemental information out. And this really gets to the heart of what we're talking about, Jamal, because the fact of the matter is, I left a lot of breadcrumbs. I left a lot of initial seeds so that people can take and really expand and expound and develop the stories further. Because the fact of the matter is, no matter what the well intentions of a well meaning white guy are, I do not have the ability, capacity, or otherwise the thing that's needed, the joie de vivre or whatever it is, that would allow me to really understand it, to expound on things enough. David was being broad enough, big enough, and I love his book and I love him as a scholar, but he was being broad enough and big enough to be able to tell all those stories, because a lot of them were white people, some of them were poor people, some of them were immigrants, Irish people, and Italian people. Like, he really went into all of that. But the fact of the matter is, they stayed pretty on the, I don't want to say on the surface, because the story of George Smith and that lynching is horrible and deep. But the fact is, he didn't get granular. I wanted to get granular, at least to make sure that everything got recorded. So another version of the book, the next edition of the book, or the second copy, whatever the expansion is for me, would go into all of that. But I think it's the vital obligation of a reader to pick it up, tell me what's missing, but then to take it themselves and go further with it. And that's really what I'm hoping happens with that hashtag Omaha Black History book. Let's grow it out.
Right. One of the challenges I see, and again, I look at some of the black churches and some of them not following the lead of doing some of the social justice they did in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and some of them becoming much more established and embedded in city and county government have taken funds. But I was unaware of the Intercirial Minister Alliance in Omaha and the black sororities and fraternities that existed way back in the day. Your book talks about. You also allude to the Pullman Porters as an opportunity for black people to get jobs here in the city. And of course, the Union Pacific Railroad was very important in that. And also the strength of the NAACP back then. Sometimes we hear about the Poorest Club as the only civil rights, again, is promulgated by certain people, but a lot of black souls were doing stuff in Omaha back then. And why are we not helping people learn about a history that it didn't start with George Floyd and the Black Lives Movement, particularly for those who are old school? So help
That's
me
right.
with that, because I'm just
That's
blown
right.
away by how I learned this new recently stuff, and yet we still got people who are stuck in thinking history starts when George Floyd was killed in terms of
History
social
starts
stuff.
when they show up.
Okay,
And that's one of the dilemmas of everybody. Like, we don't know what we don't know, and there's a lot of that we don't know. The fact of the matter is, and what you're talking about right there, the first black activism in Omaha that I can find, Al Jamal, is 1869, when this dude named Edwin Overall shows up. Edwin Overall was a conductor on the Underground Railroad during the Civil War, and right before that in Chicago. He was the end station that helped people ferry across and get into Canada for safety. Edwin Overall was also a recruiter for the U.S. Army in Chicago to get blacks to sign up for the Army. So old boy was at it. Then he comes to Omaha. He goes to work for the U.S. Post Office. It's the first ever black person to work for the government in Nebraska. And then he starts activism. He has two young daughters who are sent to the Omaha Colored School in 1867 when he shows up. These young ladies had to go to the Omaha Colored School. You won't hear OPS talk about that. They have a beautiful website where they've talked about the history of Omaha schools, but they do not talk about the Omaha Colored School, a strictly segregated school that existed from 1867 to 1871. Now, why did it close? Because Edwin Overall started the first ever activism by bringing parents to the school board meetings, black parents, to say, we want our kids to go to school in our neighborhoods. And it worked. After 3 years of activism, they got it shut down. They got those kids sent out. Now, that means that one school down in South Omaha had one black kid, or one school in, quote, West Omaha, all the way out on 40th Street, had a black kid. But eventually, we of course know that OPS resegregated. And the reality is, the OPS never changed its behavior in a sincere way. But in that moment, that activism began. In 1871, that
wow,
change.
wow,
Overall, continued to be active all the way until 1899, when he organized a Congress of black and white Americans at the Trans-Mississippi Exposition at Kuntz Park in 1898. And then in 99, he passed away. So, old boy, he just went at it all those years. And that was 15 years before, 16 years before the NAACP started in Omaha, in its Omaha's chapter. And who started that? Reverend John Albert Williams, who was tied together with the churches. You mentioned the churches, and I mentioned St. Philip's, but we also have Zion Baptist. Zion Baptist over on Grant Street, they were the jam starting in the 1910s. They had all the activists coming through. They had ministers who were just on fire with the word, but also with civil rights. And they were
Right.
really beginning to pull that conversation out and start that conversation up. There was, of course, St. John's AME, which is the oldest Black church in Omaha from 1867. They were a hotbed of activism that was happening in 1910s. So we
And,
had all these churches stepping up. That Interministerial Alliance was around in the 1930s, kept going for a very long time into the 70s. And the fact of the matter is, they did all kinds of things. They did ecumenical events where they pulled together churches from different denominations. They did Black Pride events where they pulled together churches from different Black churches from different Black denominations to do celebrations and worship and sing in ways that Omaha had never imagined before. So there was a lot of fire. I mean, people were really going at it for a very long time before 2020. 2020 is not even a footnote in my book, if only because first, my book came out in 2021, but second, because 2020 was just yesterday. When we think about this long span of time, and like you're saying,
we only got 2 minutes left for I got you.
Yeah, just what I'm saying though is that this history, not only 1850s when Omaha started, but actually goes back to the 1804, actually goes back to the 1700s. Gotcha. And Omaha's got this old history with Black people that it's never confronted, and that's what the book is all about.
Well, and this is why I criticize Black studies in these so-called fake DI programs, because at the end of the day, you walk out dumber than you walk in, because you got lazy people who don't write. And I know some of them got their PhD, but it's obviously honorary degrees, because I ain't seen them in the community nor write. But I'll switch up a little bit because I get to say things like that. I noticed in your book, as I was reading it, you jump back and forth a lot. Maybe it's the way you talk, but why don't you have a little bit more where you put that chapter in a certain, but you got people in different segments and you kind of repeat some things they do. So help me a little bit with how you organize the structure of your book.
Yeah. The reality is, Jamal, I am just a writer in process. I've written my million words. I've put out so much publication, not only in history, but in education and social justice and all kinds of things. I write prolifically. I love to write, and I'm not a perfect writer by any measure. And the fact of the matter is, I'm also a poor, goofy white guy who's just out here struggling on his own to make it in the world. So I couldn't afford to hire an editor. I had a couple of critical readers, but they were friends who were just like being nice or saying kind things when they read it. But it's not the book that it could be. That is a fact.
I got you. Okay, we cool. I'm switch up again on you.
Yeah.
I noticed that if you were to write another book, and you alluded to this of this book, what would you change? What specifically would you change based on the feedback, not only of whatever, but what would you change dramatically or not in this book if you had to do a revised edition, or you go back and read time and had to do something else?
Well, the fact of the matter is, Jamal, I am proud of the book. Let's not eliminate that by any measure. First, I put a wide margin in that with the point of being able to take notes, because I love writing in books, and I'm very proud of that. I'm also very proud of it being a chronological book. I start at the oldest date and I work my way all the way up to 2020, and I really make a point of bringing that out. And I don't do that in my other history books. My North Omaha history volumes were all by subject, and they were chunked out, transportation.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
That kind of thing. And I didn't do that in this, and I'm very proud of that. I really like that chronology. But I think the fact of the matter is, I did not shine. One of the things that I was trying to balance is the accomplishments of end-to-end Black excellence in Omaha's history, because I honor the firsts. I honor the accomplishments. I honor the things done. But I'm also trying to balance all of the negative things that Omaha needs to wake up to. The fact of the matter is, those 2 lynchings that we understand, Omaha was home to several other attempted lynchings. Omaha was home to several other heinous events against African-American males because they were Black males in a time when, just like today, when white people look down on Black people simply because of the color of the skin and the demonization of Black people. I would have brought more of a light to that. I would have brought that way out front and really brought that, not to diminish the accomplishment, not to diminish Black excellence, but to say there is a framework, there is a system, there is an understanding here. The other thing that I would have made a point of is more of a graphic interface. I love to make a graphic that's good. I love showing an infographic that actually portrays a story. And the fact of the matter is, this book needs something that pops. I need some more historical pictures. I need some more graphics. I need some more things that grab the reader as it goes along. And I want to make it more like a history book, like a school would use. And frankly, that's the end of the story right there, is that I want to make it something that young people will read. And maybe that's a whole different book.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, we need young people learning this information. We need young Black people learning it, but we also need young white people. We need some goofy kid growing up at 27th and Ellison who thinks he has an eyeball on things to get a hold of it and say, wow, I want to know this, learn it, feel it, do it. Right. And a good book can do that.
One of the comments I would make is, there's a Zen proverb that says the marksman does not read the poetry, or there's some things people don't do if they don't have a sense of knowledge and understanding. So sometimes people look at you a certain way, sideways, because at the end of the day, they don't have your interest, nor do they go out of the way to self-educate themselves when it's obvious the school system is miseducated, so on. Two more questions before we disappear. One more, at least. I deal a lot with the Confederate Daughters of Confederacies and institutions, Douglas County, city, social service, Department of Health and Service. They got a whole cadre of mean white girls and Karens and Beckys who don't care about race and issue, but they fake it like they do, especially the criminal justice area of some of those crime commission meetings and so on. And some of them don't respond. They're afraid to talk about racism. They talk about everything in the sun, and it's a taboo topic for many white people. I noticed that. And some of the so-called Negroes, as Malcolm called them, as Malcolm said that, particularly in educational system. My question to you, at UNO, Creighton, and Omaha Plantation Schools, why do we have a hard time dealing with your book? And also a question is, how often are you inviting those institutions to share the knowledge or the love that you're doing on this show?
Jamal, one of the things that I'm adamant about, my website, this northomahistory.com, it's free, and there's 850 articles in there. Free. I just wanted to blow the doors open, let everybody get it, anybody who could. I knew that this book would not be a hot seller. I knew it wouldn't be the bestseller. I knew it wouldn't be all that because people are afraid of the history that's being told in it. So I sent out 100 free copies to African-American and white leaders in Omaha who I thought needed to have a copy. So every member of city council got a copy. Every member of OPS's board of directors got a copy. Every high school social studies teacher lead got a copy. The social studies director, the history director for the districts got a copy. And so I sent out 100 free copies. I made sure that Preston Love Jr. got a hold of one. I made sure that Eric Ewing got a hold of one. I made sure that Terry Saunders, all these folks got a hold of one in order to just let them know this is out there for you and for the community, however it's received. I put it up on Amazon so that people go and order it nicely. I've had a few bookstores call me and kind of rain on my parade because I rely on Amazon for my distribution. But the fact of the matter is, I can make deals. I can help people get copies. And I made that all explicit in my letter that I put in with the book. The fact of the matter is, though, it didn't happen. People haven't picked up this book. It hasn't.
Wait, hold on. I'm kind of slow some days on Wednesday. You said you got 100 copies of all these so-called educated people, and no one bit at the nibble of the hook that's out there.
4 years ago. Now, to his credit, the great Preston Love Jr., who's doing the wonderful history tours and the other things, he bit. And we partnered together on a variety of things. But that's it. 100 copies. I've had some great conversations with Terry Sanders, but that's it. 100 copies. This is money out of my pocket, mailing them across the country, the whole thing. And I haven't heard nothing.
Well, as there's $2, I'm not mad at you, as I say, but the issue is at some point we have to burden a sense of self-efficacy or education to help learn ourselves and heal ourselves. And it's hard to do that when you're walking around with self-imposed ignoramuses in position of leadership. We're down to the last point where I get ready to switch over, but one of the things I was just always asked is there anything else you want to share before we move over to the audience or the participants to ask direct questions to you? And by the way, there's somebody who came in on an iPad, but we don't put people in who we can't identify because we had somebody do some crazy Zoom bombing on us. So I just throw that out. So you got to identify yourself to come in and participate in the conversation. But any closing marks before we transition to the participants, Adam?
Jamal, this might sound crass. It might sound something. I don't really care. I'm just going to speak honestly. The fact of the matter is, I have got to stop trying to do what I'm doing. I'm trying to advocate for Black history as a well-meaning white person, and that's the best that I can do, but it's always going to fail. It's always going to fall short. And the fact of the matter is, the community needs to step up. And I'm not saying that as me. I'm saying that just as an observer, as a passing by person. I'm a tourist at best. And the fact is, I need to turn over the reins and not turn them over. I need to drop them. I need to set them down. I need to walk away. And I would love to see anybody step up. And if anybody here is ready to do that, if anybody here is ready for that conversation, oh, please let me help you however I can. I will donate. I will give. I will do whatever I can. But the fact is, I got to stop doing it. So whatever helps move that along, I'm all about it.
Well, as they say, what's that Billy Preston song? I like nothing from nothing leaves nothing. If you want to be involved, something better to be with me on that. So at the end of the day, if you can't write your name and you don't know how to sign a check or do anything, I can't help you out. As I say, when the window of opportunity opens and you want to be a doctor, but you don't have the medical training, you can't do that. If you want to be a pilot and you've never been on an airplane, you can't fly it. So at the end of the day, who are we to blame on some levels until we do that? So let me throw it open to the people here. Ask Adam any questions, and I'd like if you put them in the chat or ask him directly. We just want to keep it succinct so we get as much feedback as possible this 30 minutes here.
I'd like to ask.
Go ahead, Marlene.
As I was listening, I wanted to pose this question to you. what do you want the reader to take away from this book? If you had three things,
Yeah.
what three things would you want the reader to take away after reading this book?
Thank you, Marlene. The very first thing is that Omaha's history is so much more than old white guys, and that's the main message. I hope that comes ringing through to anybody who picks it up and flips through the first couple pages. The second thing would be that the history of African Americans in Omaha is so much longer than anybody imagines, because a lot of people they imagine that it started in 1966 when there were riots on 24th Street, and they're all concerned. Get out of here with that. We know that Black people have been in the Omaha region since long before the city was even started, and we need to talk about that openly. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is that history isn't finished. One of the things that I was really intentional about doing at the end is saying, hey, this story's still being written, because the fact of the matter is we do have to include the George Floyd protests in the book. We do have to include the election of the first African-American mayor in Omaha's history in the book, or the next book, or the next movement, or whatever it is that goes on from here. So it's those three things that really pop for me, Marlene. It's not all about old white people. It's not all about 1969 and when you can remember it starting. And it's not just up to this date. It's actually history is being made right now.
Yeah, thank you, Marlene. Other questions, other feedback? I see a couple people got their mics open.
I was going to ask, so Adam, I haven't had a chance to read the book, but at the very beginning as you were starting to talk, you mentioned that North Omaha hasn't always just been for Black people. And I'm wondering, do you expand upon that, knowing that right now, as we look at the demographics of North Omaha, the people leaving the most is Black and African Americans, and that the history of this community is changing, and it has been over the last 10 plus years. So I'm wondering, do you touch on that and look at the dynamics of the changing people of color that are now inhabiting this area?
Thank you, Cami. I appreciate you asking that. The fact of the matter is,
hold on, somebody put their mic on mic. Go ahead.
The fact of the matter is that I didn't get much into population statistics and demographics inside of the book beyond a cursory kind of glance. After I came out with the book, I went and did a deep dive into the history of the African-American population in Omaha. You can find that on NorthOmahaHistory.com. But the fact of the matter is, and I keep saying the fact of the matter, apparently, North Omaha's population, and again, it depends on how we define it. If you want to define it as the box between Ames Street down to Cumming, from 14th Street over to, I don't know, 40th, then we are talking about a majority African-American population. If we're blowing out the directions, though, if we're talking about North Omaha the way the media does, the way the politicians do, talking about everything north of Dodge, talking about everything east of 72nd, generalizing and categorizing and trying to make it all convenient, then we're talking about a lot of white people. We're talking about a lot of Hispanic Latinx people. We're talking about a lot of people who don't identify as American. We're talking about a lot of non-citizens. We're talking a lot about African Americans, but not only about African Americans. So I think that the story is bigger, richer, and thicker than just African American people solo. And again, using North Omaha as a synonym, this is a history that it actually has long standing in North Omaha, not for the freight, or in the history of Omaha, it's a long standing thing to use a neighborhood's name as a synonym for Black people. Before, it wasn't North Omaha. They used to talk about the near north side. The newspapers did, and then later the TV stations did, all the way into the 1970s, when there were Black ministers who said publicly out loud, I've got an article that cites them, where they were like, stop saying near north side. We know what you're saying when you say near north side. And the fact of the matter is, they were saying Black people. And so using North Omaha as a synonym for Black people is just as racist as using near north side as a synonym for Black people, because Black people in Omaha, we know, are much more than any geographic boundary, and that they are actually a community that's longstanding and deep. But we have to acknowledge, if we're talking about this geographic community, it's much more than just Black. It's everybody. And that's the story that I'm going to keep telling no matter what, because North Omaha is huge. And it's got this great history that's longstanding, and it's so much more than African Americans, not exclusive to or against Black people. And I want to see that history just woven together like the blanket that it is, because the fact is, at the end of the day, you cut Black people out, you cut North Omaha out, you cut Omaha out. Black history is Omaha history. Black people are Omaha. And the fact is, we got to keep telling that story, weave it together.
Adam, there's a question in the chat that says, did you collaborate with any families from the book or other historians' organizations when researching the book?
That's a great question. Yes, is the answer. My collaborations, though, are not academic and they are not funding. I'm not funded at all. I don't get any money to do this. I didn't get any money to write this book. I didn't get a book contract or anything fancy like that. The fact of the matter is, I partner with individual people who've shown up to me. One of the greatest partnerships that I have in Omaha is a guy named Freddie Clapton, who was the past leader of the Black Masons, of the Prince Hall Masons at 24th and Ames. Freddie and his wife Karen stepped up and they really helped me out, pushed my energy, my ideas forward. A lot of folks online stepped up and really helped that out, both white and African American, but predominantly African American. I had a chance to sit down and talk with several people. And I'm also hauling around this legacy. And one of the reasons why I do what I do, to go back to your question about that, Al Jamal, is that I carry my stories that I got from the griots in my life when I was growing up as a young man. Idu Mahili was one of my best teachers. He taught me drum. He taught me theater. He taught me how to work with young people. He set the trajectory of my whole career. And I still carry stories about North Omaha that he told me from when he was a young man in the 70s. I still carry the stories from Mrs. Hickerson. I still carry the stories from all these different folks. So my collaborations have been vast and big, but also very informal and very loose, because the organizations that I reached out to partner with didn't get back to me. And the individuals that I wanted to talk to didn't respond. So this is the dilemma of being a well-meaning white guy, is that you don't get access to everybody that you want, but also the dilemma of not being a systems operator. I'm underneath the radar. I'm doing this guerrilla style, and I don't get access just because, who are you again? Why are you doing this? And I'm constantly questioned, and I'm constantly answering that question. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking.
Another thing it brings to mind, we did a history conference last year. We're going to do another one this year, but we're talking about the 50th anniversary of the busing case. And I reached out to Harry and Daryl Urey, because her mom is mentioned along with my mother and those 7 women. Mrs. Urey, respectful. She's late now, like my mother, but she had nothing to do with the 7 interveners. She worked at legal aid, but as I pointed to OPS, making history visible to, change the history, because we know the narrative, because we grew up in that family, they didn't do it. And I reached out to some other folks. And again, for the record, when you tell your history from someone who lived it or experienced it, is different than the hunter who tells their history from the lion. And it's unfortunate, or it's kind of a misfortune that an institution like this OPS is propagating misnomers that didn't exist. Again, Mrs. Urey is a great person. The community did a lot. We knew her, but she was not part of the busing case as one of the 7 interveners. And so if we can't even get right the 7 people who put their names on the line, what about the other kind of misnomers and stuff that we get out of the plantation educational system? Other questions, other feedback, throw it out to other folks.
I have a question for you. If there's a part 2 of this book, what does that look like?
It's a great question. And honestly, I don't know yet. I do know that I have another book forthcoming that I'm collaborating with more on. The book is about the Omaha civil rights movement specifically. I'm going to uncover the racist roots of the city, pull out all the laws. See, people like to talk about Omaha like it just had some kind of informal Jim Crow. Everything was just de facto. Everybody just understood this is what it was. But the fact of the matter is, I've got 100 laws, rules, and regulations from the history of Omaha between 1854, when it was founded, and 1900 that specifically prohibited Black people from ... I'm going to lay that out. I'm going to put in the activist campaigns, the organizing campaigns, the legal campaigns, and the other efforts that were done to defeat segregation, to defeat discrimination, and to overcome white supremacy. And we're going to lay it out into one sweet book. So that's going to step separately than this hashtag Omaha Black History. I don't know if this needs a part 2 or it needs deeper, better, more, thicker. The fact of the matter is, some people have done some great scholarship around this. There's some wonderful master's degrees, thesis. There's some wonderful doctoral dissertations, just a couple. But and there's great work done by on the founder of the Omaha Star. There's some great work done on Preston Love Sr. that did his autobiography, a couple of great athletes' autobiographies. But the fact of the matter is, we got to go deeper. We got to go broader. We got to go better. We got to go thicker, and all those things. And doing a part 2 of this book probably wouldn't do that well. So from here out, I'm looking at going deeper, doing a deeper dive in specific things. That civil rights movement being the next one on my radar.
As you alluded to, the concept of PhDs and master's degree, I remember a time when Renee Kohlberg, who was the assistant superintendent of schools curriculum, and we sat down for a conversation about the curriculum, which is how brainwashed and dysfunctional it was. But anyways, we got into this argument, and I could be tense in the debate. And Barry Thomas was in the room. He was one of the curriculum persons in the department. They just promoted him from North High School. He saw me in action again sometime people can see you into a certain kind of activities, but they don't always pick up your techniques. But in the conversation, she pushed back at me and says, "Oh, Jamal, my dissertation was on multiculturalism in Omaha and race issues." And I was shocked because this Karen Becky, who's been one of my adversaries who didn't have time of the day, had written something. Again, that's one of my criticism. You got these people who can write academic stuff on a certain level, but they don't take it to the next step and bring it to the masses. And I know we got people in Black studies who've written wonderful books or dissertations, well, their dissertation, but you go and look or search for their research and their activities. It's obviously got an honorary degree. Again, my point not to be throwing shade at people, but how do you take some difficult work you go through, you produce some of the most great genealogy work, you name it, and then you don't take it to the next level so the masses can deal with it. So that was the one point I was going to raise here, that we don't do that.
Jamal, let me just say real quick. Let me just say real quick in response to what you just said. This is why the book is literally called hashtag Omaha Black History, because if you go on Facebook, if you go on Instagram, you type in hashtag Omaha Black History, boom, you have more than 1,000 posts on each one with its own unique graphic, its own unique tile, historical pictures, all kinds of things, all about Omaha Black history. I've been using this exclusively for years now, for a decade almost. And the fact is, that's its own historical database separate from the book.
Wow.
So the book is really just reflecting what I built on social media. But the point was to get to do what you're saying. If those folks could take and reach the masses, do this public education and get us off our derrieres, the fact is we can move this whole conversation that much further forward.
So sometimes we wonder, Kevin, you got a question? Go for it. That was good. Thank you. Kevin, I saw your hand up.
So I'm here with my aunts. My aunt Vicky has a question. Adam, does the book talk about how African Americans lived in South Omaha? And then before being, and like how a lot of them, because of the stockyards and things like that.
Ooh, you just got me. Give it to your aunt. She just got me. The fact of the matter is, I really intentionally dug into downtown Omaha's history. The reality is African Americans in Omaha have always been segregated by where they live. Before there was a North Omaha, before there was a South Omaha. Remember, South Omaha only came up in the 1880s. The city of Omaha was started in the 1850s. In that period in between, Black people were segregated to living around 12th and Dodge. That was the first near North Side neighborhood, was around 12th and Dodge. If you picture that today, you know it's in the middle of downtown Omaha. There's no evidence that any Black people were ever there today, let alone 150 years ago. So I tried to really draw that out, and I tried to make it explicit that Black people were in downtown first, and that Black people had this presence in other parts. The first Black fire station was actually way over at 28th and Poppleton. I mean, it was out because that's where Black people were living. So I didn't get to South Omaha because I do think, Cammie, that South Omaha needs its own examination. When the HOLC, the Homeowner Loaner Corporation, the federal organization that built redlining formally across the United States and in Omaha, when they did their map, South Omaha got redlined just like North Omaha, much smaller area regionally, but it was still there. And of course, the history of Black people in South Omaha is its own unique thing. Somebody's got to draw that out. So that goes into one of those deep dives that I would love to see somebody do. And the fact of the matter is, and I hate to admit this, but this is my own bias and ignorance, I am from North Omaha, graduated from North High School, V up, and whatever about South. Just playing. But you know, there's that smack talking, there's that part of the city, and I still got that somewhere in my bones, so I'm fighting against it, blah, blah, blah. I need to
listen, I hear that, and I was a South Side grad. I'm a South High grad, so South Side.
You know what's funny, Kevin, and I throw this out at you. I was at a lecture or presentation Adam did at Mount Olive Church in North Omaha, who ultimately didn't want to work with us because they looked at our webpage and couldn't agree with us. I'm not throwing shade at them, I'm just saying that's their reality. But I remember somebody raised to Adam directly and says, "Why don't you write about South Omaha or do that?" And Adam pushed back and said, "Wait, hold it. That's for you to do. I'm dealing only with North Omaha." So it was kind of comical. But the point is, he gave us a roadmap. And again, we who do our own histories, at some point, we need to do our own genealogy in our family. And then sometime we can be nice enough to find other people who can help us. But at the end of the day, if you don't write it, who's going to write it for you? And don't expect me to eat the food for you if you got to chew it up. So I hear what you're saying, but I really would love to see South Omaha people, because there's a rich history also over there, equally as well as North.
The other thing to say really quick is that South Omaha actually has its own museum. It's over at the Old Center Mall. And the fact is, they do have some Black history in there, but they got some Italian history. They got some old Jewish history. I mean, all kinds of history, but all about that thickness of South Omaha. North Omaha doesn't have its own museum. The Great Plains Black History Museum doesn't deal with North Omaha specifically. There have been people who come to me over the last decade and said, hey, we need to have a North Omaha History Museum. And I'm like, more power to you. Florence has its own, but we all know how segregated and white that can be.
Right.
So we got to really draw out this North Omaha history and shine a light on it. That's all I'm trying to do. But Cammie, more props to you. And again, to your aunt, I love that question. Thank you for calling that out.
Other feedback, other questions. We got about 15 minutes. I got another question to throw out, but I want to get the audience in this one. Let me throw my question out. There's an article here. There's a lot of rich information book that I didn't know and was curious to learn more about, whether it would be the lives, place, and organization. Which people and stories did you want to explore more? Whether it be the different perspectives of Black newspapers, Booker T. Washington example, Church's people, or Dr. Ricketts? Great question.
All right, so I'm going to read this question again just so I can get it, because that's a whole lot in there, Noe. I appreciate the thickness of it. Which people or stories do you want to explore more? So I want to write a biography of Edwin Overall. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that in my lifetime. The fact of the matter is, these stories of these African-American leaders from back in the olden days are hard to get a hold of. I accidentally uncovered once the story of an African-American preacher. She was a feminist, an abolitionist, Baptist, and she helped get all of this going back in the day in Nebraska, in North Omaha, and her story had been lost. And I went digging for it. I found some newspaper articles, and I really brought out her story, and I shared it online. And a year after I had shared it, I got a note. I got a note from Long Beach, California. And it was a nice card. And I opened up the card, and it was scrawled handwriting. You know how folks write when they get older. And this card came from a woman who said that she was 102 years old.
Wow.
And that I told the story of her grandmother. And she said that she had never seen a picture of her grandmother until I shared what I found in some old stanky newspaper.
Wow.
And she's just like, you have reconnected me to my family's history in a way that we've never seen. This woman, and I'm trying really hard to remember her name, but I'm not going to right now. She was the first ever candidate for a statewide office in Nebraska. She ran for the Regents Board for the University of Nebraska. She got turned down for that. She got denied and didn't get on. But she still was so powerful, such a powerful figure. I'm going to drop her name here in the whatchamacallit in just a minute when I dig it up. Whether it be different perspectives of different Black newspapers, churches, people like Dr. Ricketts, etc. Yeah, so I want to tell Edwin Overall story. I want to get the story about the civil rights history in Omaha out there. But you know, the other thing that I think is super important, Omaha is fixated on Black people as entertainment for white people. So let me just say that again. Omaha is fixated. White Omahans are fixated on Black people as entertainment for white Omahans. So we have read and received autobiographies from Black sports figures, Black entertainers. We have read and seen books published by the Omaha World Herald about all the Black sports figures in Omaha that really only contained stories about baseball, football, and basketball. They didn't talk about Black sports. They talked about the big three. No diss on anybody who's ever played those. No diss on anybody who wrote those books. But the fact is, Black people are so much more than that. We need a history on Black professionalism in Omaha. I need somebody to teach me and tell me and show me about Black excellence in Omaha and the classism that's innate in it. And far be it from me to be able to talk about this because I'm a blue-haired or blue-eyed, bald-headed, goofy white guy. We need somebody to teach African-American people and white people about colorism. And the reality that in Omaha, there is a long tradition of favoring, and this is my place to say it. If I'm saying it out of line, somebody please straighten me out. Favoring light-skinned African-American people over dark-skinned African-American people. That is a plain and true thing that I could show you evidence of going back 150 years. That's not my place to write about, but I would love to read that history. And so, yes, there are a lot of stories that I wanted to dig further into. The next question right there in the chat is, was there a story that I wanted to add but didn't? And to answer that, Damien, yes, is the answer to that. I didn't know how to add it, and I still don't think it belongs in this specific book. After I got done with it, I dug up the history of the KKK in Omaha. And people diminish that. They dismiss it. They try to push it aside. They take Malcolm X's story of what happened to his mother in Omaha, and they push that aside. No, there was no hooded people riding up to Malcolm X's family's house to scare them out a year after he was born. Yes, there was. Yes, there was. Yes, Earl Little, Malcolm's father, was an organizer for the UNIA. And yes, they did target him because they targeted a lot of Black people at that point. Oh, there was also this thing called the Committee of 5,000. You can Google that on NorthOmahaHistory.com, and you're going to read about a systemic structural program to dismiss, eliminate, and otherwise deny Black people in Omaha that was run by the mayor. You could read about Tom Dennison. This is one of the things that
You said that happened a long time ago. Is that something that happened in our lifetime recent with the last previous meals or some of them?
So here's the thing.
That's
Jamal, it's from the 1920s, this Committee of 5,000.
Wow. Okay.
And so this history of racism is thick and it goes back. And all that has to be told. So, and I wanted to add those details, Damien, but I didn't know them at the point. And now I've got more and more and more of this. And that's the book that I'm going to be writing and we're going to get out next.
By the way, I learned a lot about the KKK in Nebraska that was prominently marching down Old Street in Lincoln. I didn't know there was a prominent KKK in Omaha until reading your book. I've heard of, again, people like on the state patrol or KKK that Ernie Chambers got rid and got fired, but I didn't know that. But what this leads to is, what is your relationship? Because I know that we got two historical groups in Lincoln. One is the archive, a lot of research. What's your relationship to those two historical entities that keep some of the archives and history of state history? Both of them.
So the Nebraska State Historical Society is the state's agency that's responsible for documenting Nebraska's history. I have no relationship with them. I've never published in the Nebraska History magazine. I've never been invited to do a talk for them. None of that. The fact is, again, I'm a guerrilla researcher. I'm out here in the fields, out here in the forest doing the thing, and they don't have room, time, or space for my shenanigans. Oh, and also I use the phrase white supremacy, and I use the phrase racism, and I talk about white people being ignorant, and they don't care for that. Jamal, I think you can relate to that a little bit. But the fact is, so the Nebraska State Historical Society, I have respect for what they do, and they hold a lot of the archives and the tools that I need to do the work that I do, and I would love to do them more and better. So more access, please, to the NSHS. But I'm still learning, I'm still growing, and the fact is, they could get. I need more. The other entity I think you're alluding to is the Nebraska State Historical Museum, and that museum is thick. But the museum's also the curator of the Great Plains Black History Museum collection, and so I need access to that, and they don't share. They don't respond well. One of the things that I'm uncovering right now, I'm actually working with David Bristow and Ajamal around uncovering what's called the Chenoweth Film Archive. This old director from the 1919, he started his film company in 1914. In 1919, he was downtown on September 29th and filmed the riots and lynching of Will Brown.
Wow.
That film was supposedly brought to the Nebraska State Historical Society and put into the Nebraska State Museum and in their archives. So we're going to see if we can track that down and shine some light on it. I uncovered this story originally 5 or 6 years ago with a high school history teacher in OPS, and now we're just reigniting that and trying to see if we can get any traction on it.
Gotcha.
We need to uncover that film.
We're down to about last segment, but I want to throw this out, and I think this is probably key to part of this conversation. You wrote extensive 50-page document, at least, about the police brutality, the shooting of Black folks. And this happened way back in the day, and we had it happen within the last couple of years. We've had them doing that. And not one of those racist white police officers went to jail or served a day in jail. I shared it with a couple of the so-called community activists, and they kind of didn't want to read it or hear about it. Again, walking around not knowing that this is part of a pattern of the slave patrols who wear these enforcers who wear blue uniforms. But again, this is a wonderful document, and it goes how far back, and what was your reaction when you put this out on the website? Because I was surprised it didn't get much traction of some of these so-called activists who are concerned about police community relations that are so great in them all when we get shot and killed at least every 5 years when we're unarmed. So talk to me about, briefly, because we got about a few minutes before we close out, but what kind of traction did you get on this one?
So, Jamal, one of the things that I've run into with a lot of African Americans in Omaha is that they're interested in the anomaly of me being a white guy writing Black history. And that's where every conversation starts and ends. I've had some great conversations with First Sky Omaha. I've had some conversations with some other individuals, and they're always rich and thick conversations, but they're rich on that superficial kind of, I'm white, why am I writing Black history? And so that's always, I get the starting point. I understand that it's not, I don't have any superpowers. I don't have any special abilities. I don't have any special access, anything like that. I'm just interested, and I just dig a lot. That said, the response that I did get to that specific article on police brutality started a long time before I wrote the article and was just sharing that information on social media under hashtag Omaha Black History. I have white people rolling up on me saying that didn't happen and disputing newspaper articles. Here's the heading. Here's the headline from 1878 when a Black prostitute was brought into the police department and died in custody. oh, that didn't happen here. Oh, that didn't happen here. And that kind of response of these white supremacists who don't know how to get past their own glasses on the front of their face. And the reality is that resistance has been very explicit and overt before 2020, before Black Lives Matters, before when it was okay for Omahans to be explicitly racist the way that they have been for 175 years. So in the past 5 years, one of the things that did not happen was a response from even well-meaning white people to say, oh my gosh, here's a book on Omaha Black history that I can read and access because it was written by a white person just like me. They didn't even respond with that because I'm invalidated for my race.
No, I understand that.
Again, I don't. I mean, I get it, but I don't. So those are the responses that I got, though, is that it was about me and it was white centering me rather than being about what the topic actually is.
It's funny you mentioned that. I remember I've never really been inside the administrative building of the police department per se. And sometime when I used to attend those bogus 360 meetings where they bore you to death to talk about nothing, I actually wrote a letter to the chief's daughter and said, hey, can I come and visit you? And so on. So the day we agreed, I think it was a month later, we went down there and some kind of way he snuck out the back door. And I ended up, Ken Kanger gave me a tour of the police building. They have a little dungeon jail in the basement, have their whole history. It's obviously whitewashed. But what I'm saying is they could come out in our community and do the dog and pony show every Wednesday from 2 to 3. But I rarely have ever seen them invite African Americans, and particularly those who are astute from Omaha, to come engage them inside their headquarters or their dungeons. And again, if I'm lying, give me the dates and times. But like I say, he was celebrated when I got there, or he had another meeting to go to. Well, I think he might have been hiding in the bathroom for all I know. But like I say, that's part of the issue. We already got a couple minutes and we're getting ready to close out. But Adam, anything that you want to add or say before we get off the set? Something, and also, by the way, shameless plug, you're going to be speaking at our October the 4th conference then with hashtag Black Omaha as well. We're going to talk about issues about Black sororities, fraternities. We also going to have something about the elderly. We're also going to have something that deals with literacy and so on. Then we also going to have an extended conversation with you, hopefully with some people who are astute enough to ask questions about some things that they've read in the book. And then we also going to have a couple of folks who critique it. But anything you would say as we leave and move on?
Jamal, first, I mean, and foremost and always, I'm so grateful to you for this opportunity, for this occasion and this ability. I'm grateful for everybody who came here. I have been put into a position and given the opportunity to use my power, to use my privilege in order to do this work. I have sacrificed a little bit. Again, this is not a paid occupation for me. This is a side career. The AI told me the other day, you're doing 2 careers. How are you doing that? Well, I'm giving them one up for free. And so that's my privilege. And I'm well aware of that. I want people to knock me off of this block. I do not want to be here any longer. And the fact of the matter is, I'm going to open myself up for criticism, for concerns, for ideas and pushback and everything as much as possible. I've been trying to do that for years. I'm going to keep doing it more and more, especially the longer that I stay at this, because we don't need another loudmouth old white guy at the front of any room trying to teach anybody about anything, specifically about Black people and Black people's history. We need Black people to be doing this, and I need to stop. So I guess that's my piece. I just thank you for the opportunity, and please help me stop doing it.
Good. Well, one of the reasons we're doing this conference is that see if we can find some grassroots folks and also put the fire into the feet of folks who are somewhat critical but don't deliver. And as Matthew Staley, the late Matthew Staley said, some of us can destroy and that, but we can't build. And so I'll go in that notion we need to deal with it. The other point I was taught by my late wife sometime when she says, when you're drowning, you don't care what color that rope is. You just want a rope to get out of the water.
You're going to grab it.
Quicksand. So we got folks who are drowning. They have no clue that they want to be selective. And they, again, they haven't dealt with some of the issues in our community. The other point I want before we close out, we're going to have Rochelle Tucker coming up talking about some of the issues related to education. I'm always curious about why Black people go to historically Black colleges when I went to predominantly white college in Lincoln, Nebraska. So she's going to explain why they do that, especially those of us who go from Omaha. We're also going to talk with Maya Crawford Gray, about some of the experiences she's dealt with dealing with schools and education data. So we're looking forward to that. And then also, some of you may know we don't do a lot with health issues. We have Dr. Laura Tanner, talk about cancer and some of the prevention issues, but we want to branch our topics out to different topics. So we encourage you to share with us. And by the way, this program, most people watch us on Facebook Live. Some people are afraid to be caught on this program. So we want people to continue to join us and help us do this. And the last point I'm going to say is for almost 40 years, I've been trying to get Black folks to have a program on Nebraska educational television. Now it's called the Media Nebraska or Nebraska Media. They're talking about cutting their funding. I don't care. They have never in the history had a person of color statewide doing a program on their segregated apartheid station. So again, in spite of Sesame Street and all those wonderful programs, if we cannot reach back to the very people who to play a role in developing their own news, what good is they to us? And as Ernie said many times, I want to have substance from our community and not have this paternalistic great white savior that we get out of our local public radio and television. And even more insulting is the public television radio in Nebraska or Omaha, controlled by the Omaha Public Schools, which is 80% people of color. So I throw that out as we need to ask some tough questions and I get mad at the messengers who we are, because again, we're like Haley's Comet. We only come once in a lifetime, like Malcolm Martin and so on. And if we don't use their words of wisdom and crawl on their shoulders and do work for the next generation, we'll be caught in the cesspool of this hamster wheel that we're in today. And again, I'm surprised, as Martin Luther King said, the silence of our friends. So on that note, folks, appreciate you being here today. We hope you join us next week for another edition of Throwing Out Some Heavy Light. And as we always end, may the force be with you. Barocco.